Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Lunch and Learn. These programs let us go deep with some incredible musicians on a specific topic. I'm Tim Munro, and I'm creative partner with the SLSO. That means I get to do a bunch of different things for the SLSO. I write, I speak, I curate, and I get to do things like this to chat with wonderful musicians like Stephanie and Stéphane. So today is our official welcome party for Stephanie Childress, who was recently appointed to the SLSO as Assistant Conductor. But first, a housekeeping thing. We invite you to ask questions using the chat function throughout today's Lunch and Learn. It's at the bottom of the screen. We'll take questions from the audience throughout via the chat, and please make sure your message is sent to both panelists and attendees. Ask questions about conducting or music or life or food or touring, anything that you like. And importantly, we'd like to extend our special thanks to the SLSO 2020-2021 Classical Series sponsor, the Stewart Family Foundation. So let's welcome our guests. Stéphane Denève is now in his second season as music director of the SLSO. He brings intelligence and passion, collaboration, a deep sense of community, and of course, incredible hair to everything he does. And we're joined by Stephanie Childress. Stephanie started her musical career as an incredibly talented violinist, but now she's making people really sit up and take notice as a conductor. Stephanie was recently appointed to the position of assistant conductor by Stéphane. We're going to spend this next hour with Stephanie and Stéphane. We're going to learn a bit about Stephanie's history, learn about the role of assistant conductor, and lots of other things. Welcome to you both. Thanks for joining us. So, first of all, I wanted to just get a general kind of idea of what this role is of assistant conductor. I think we have a broad sense of what a music director does or a guest conductor. But Stephanie, what is an assistant conductor?
Well, firstly, thank you very much for organising this, and thank you very much for having me and for tuning in. I would say one of the most important roles of an assistant conductor is to learn as much as possible, to learn from his or her surroundings. I get to work with the fabulous Stéphane and learn from him. I get to collaborate with the SLSO musicians, and more importantly, I get to be the music director of the youth orchestra in St. Louis. So that's an even more kind of wide-ranging, network with the community. I think also, I hope that my role will include, supporting Stéphane as a conductor, supporting any other conductor who comes along to conduct the St. Louis Symphony Orchestra, and fundamentally just getting involved as much as I can with the community, learning from the community. I know that St. Louis has a very, very deep history, especially relating to music. So I'm just very excited to see where that takes me when I get to come over and meet you all.
Well, that's lovely. And we hope it's sooner rather than later, for sure. Stéphane, you yourself have a very deep experience as an assistant conductor when you were very young. I wonder if you can talk a little bit about that experience. I saw you nodding your head as Stephanie was talking about it as an opportunity to learn. And I see that you worked with Georg Scholti, Georges Pretre, Gary Bettini, Seiji Ozawa, the list goes on. What were your experiences like as assistant conductor?
Well, I'm so happy to welcome Stephanie here. Really, it's fantastic to hear you speak, and that everybody will start to know you. And there is a great future ahead for you in St. Louis, that I can say. And I wish you definitely to have at least the same luck I have had myself when I was younger, assisting conductors, because I learned a lot. Already, when I was student at the Conservatoire in Paris, I had classes conducting the orchestra, but I was all the time in the Orchestre de Paris in Salle Pleyel, just to attend rehearsals and to learn what to do and also what not to do. Which you will very much see with me, I hope, what not to do, because you can see then the real life of an orchestra and what is the impact, of course, of a conductor when you see it yourself during the critical rehearsal time, which is the moment where you can see the magic happening or not. And after watching many rehearsals myself when I was still student at the Conservatoire, I was lucky enough to assist indeed some very great maestros. And this role is actually always redefined by your relationship with them. It can go from just attending and maybe asking a few questions to really helping them to really sometimes even conduct the orchestra while they are listening in the hall. I mean, many different possibilities. It all depends how engaged you are and how you create the relationship. It's a very flexible role, very versatile role, and it all depends about one key quality: curiosity.
That's so wonderful. That's so lovely. Is there? It brings a question into my head about how you teach conducting. Is it a teachable thing? How do you learn? Maybe a question first for Stéphane as a teacher in a certain sense, and Stephanie for you as maybe a conducting student.
Stephanie, tell us about what you can learn from conductors.
I think you can learn a great deal. And I think actually you probably learn more from sitting watching a rehearsal than you will in a conducting classroom. I think that's personally my experience. At least you get a more total vision, let's say, of conducting as an art form. For me, my time spent playing in youth orchestras, I think, taught me more about kind of the fundamentals of conducting than any other conducting teacher I've ever had. It's that opportunity to feel and to experience firsthand how a conductor affects your playing, how he or she presents themselves, how they talk about the music, whether it's very analytical or very musically or a combination of both. You can kind of explore how that, as I said, how that impacts you. So that's sort of my number one thing, and that's also what led me to conducting in the first place, is having all these experiences and seeing my playing evolve under different people. I think then, of course, it's so important to have people that you trust around you, especially, for example, mentors, and that's where the role of the assistant comes in. If you're being mentored by, a wonderful conductors like Stéphane was mentored, and as I will be mentored by the wonderful Stéphane as well, you then get to experience conducting at a much deeper level. The level, solely from a conductor's point of view. And that includes score studying, score preparation, but also how you handle the orchestra, how you interact with them, and how little things that you say will change their dynamic and change the dynamic in the room as well. So that's my take on learning conducting. I think there are many different aspects that exist outside of conducting classrooms.
And I love personally to work with an assistant because I learn a lot thanks to the assistant. Your predecessor, Gemma New, actually was also a wonderful artist, was very inspiring for me because she came always extremely prepared and had a lot of questions. And then we would question the score together. And of course, it was a way for me to have another mirror on my work and to just find out, what I can do better. And so it's a very important kind of meiotic, I would say, relationship as well. And I really want that we start this dialogue together, Stephanie, and that you feel, of course, totally free to say everything, including very constructive critics that I can indeed learn with you and together with you, because there is always more to discover on a piece at whatever age. And what I have been able to gain with experience and to learn from many years, I want to give back if I can.
That's so beautiful, and I can't wait to see as your kind of musical relationship develops. We're getting lots of questions in the chat about Stephanie, your background. There's a question about where your accent comes from, and I wonder if maybe you can talk a little bit about your background and also maybe when you first kind of caught the conducting bug.
Well, my accent, I like to say I sound English because that's sort of my primary nationality. I was born in London. My parents are French and American, so actually I do have some ties to the US. I grew up in a non-musical household. That's all I can say. From the very beginning, we were, you know, my parents aren't artists, or they're not involved in culture in that way. So it was a process of discovery. When I was 4 years old, I heard famous Nigel Kennedy play his famous Four Seasons, and I was blown away. That's how my musical journey started. I think for a long time, you know, I saw it as a serious hobby, but a hobby nonetheless, something that I didn't consider was going to be for me as a career. And I think that usually shocks people quite a lot, because when you become a conductor, it's kind of your whole world can become music. And it's interesting to see how I went from not thinking about music, you know, as a career path at all, to suddenly choosing one of the most intense musical career paths that there is. I decided I wanted to be a conductor at the age of 13, and I'd started playing in more, as I said, youth orchestras. And I think it's that communal aspect of music that kind of gave me the bug. Not only did I see these really fantastic conductors come and conduct our youth orchestra, the National Youth Orchestra of Great Britain, but I did feel as though I was part of a community being in an orchestra. And eventually I started watching rehearsals at the English National Opera here, and I'm in London, by the way. And they had a wonderful season. This was when I was 12 or 13, where they were doing De Rosenkavalier, Billy Budd, and Death in Venice, which are still some of my three favorite operas. And I just remember as a young teenager being blown away by the music. So it was kind of a perfect storm. All these things about music sort of came together at the right time, and that's how my realization took place. I then sort of, it sounds very peculiar to some people, but I dropped out of school at the age of 15 because I just didn't have enough time to dedicate to music, unfortunately. For anyone who's out there, you'll know that the French school system that I was in is quite rigorous. So you don't often have a lot of time for extracurricular activity. So I dropped out of school, and I decided that the best place for me to learn about music, but also the fundamentals of music, so theory, so music theory, history, philosophy even, would be at a university. So that's where I went. I went to the University of Cambridge at the age of 16. I just wanted to experience all of these things about music that I'd not experienced before, and also have some practical experience conducting. So I did my time there, and I left a few years ago, and I've sort of been conducting ever since. So it's a very peculiar journey, but it's one that's been endlessly fascinating, and I can't wait for the next leg with the St. Louis Symphony Orchestra.
Well, and honestly, it doesn't sound, you said several times how much it sounds odd to people. What it sounds like to me is that you were very self-possessed at a very young age. And actually, I think that's a really lovely way to actually ask Stéphane about your own experiences as a young person and as someone at Stephanie's age, because you also were very, it seems, self-possessed at a young age. You knew what you were, what you loved, what you wanted to do. Is that fair to say? And like, Stéphane, maybe you can think back to that time for yourself.
I will say something maybe even a bit either pretentious or provocative. I would say I felt a little bit victim of my passion for conducting, because I never ever thought I would do anything else. And the very pretentious part is that, if I'm very honest now, I could not say that long time ago, but now I can say it. From a very early age, I was absolutely sure that I would do conducting, that will do music with great orchestras at, if I may say, the highest level, which is a bit weird because my background was also not musical. And but possessed is certainly the word. I started to conduct when I was 13, did my very first concert the day of my 14th birthday. And then I went to the Conservatoire in Paris when I was 18 and started professionally with opera, which, as you heard, Stephanie loves as well, which is great, at the age 22, and never stopped conduct apart from the pandemic, March to September last year. But otherwise, I never stopped ever to make music with orchestra. So there is not one way to become a conductor. Actually, some people become much later. Some people have a real career as a musician, soloist, or in an orchestra as well, and then become conductor. What is fascinating with Stephanie, I mean, first, I think everybody is already noticing, and please don't blush, Stephanie, that she's extremely smart and extremely articulate, and I mean, fantastic, brilliant mind. And she already, at a very early age, did a lot of that because she already kind of started a career as a soloist. And if you go online on YouTube, you will find many videos of her winning competitions, playing solo with orchestra. I mean, she's a fabulous violinist to start with, and she could have very well continued a career as a prominent violin soloist all over the world. And she also had time to study at Cambridge, and then she had time to conduct and to take care of already orchestras in UK. And I mean, it's extraordinary what you already achieved, and I think we are very privileged to have you now part of our community, which I love.
Thank you. That's very kind, Stéphane. You do make me blush.
But all true based on what I know of Stéphane. He's not someone who takes that sort of thing lightly. There's a couple of questions in the chat about your work as a violinist, Stephanie. And since Stéphane mentioned that, I thought I would ask. There's a couple of questions about how you feel like that relates to your conducting work, and then maybe I'll ask Stéphane, as a pianist, whether you feel at a disadvantage because you play a non-orchestral instrument, or just like take that where you will.
Well, I'm actually always very jealous of pianists, and although I do play the piano and I'm desperately trying to improve right now, especially since I've had more time during lockdown, I mean, having the piano is just a wonderful, wonderful instrument to learn and scores and all of that. But I guess as a violinist, I've always had an interesting relationship with the violin. As I said, it was a serious hobby, but it's not something that I ever took too seriously, despite practicing my many hours a day back in the day when I used to practice a lot. What I will say is that it did give me a really good understanding of string instruments, which in a lot of traditional orchestral settings is half the orchestra. And I think especially in repertoire that has been recently greatly explored by the historically informed movement, obviously especially here in the UK, I mean the 80s, 90s saw a huge revival of historically informed playing. I think that really does benefit string instruments, I would say primarily string instruments, especially when you talk about symphonies, let's say before the 1800s. So that gave me a great kind of way in, and also I'm very specific about what I want in terms of string sounds. For example, I know what I want for different eras and the works that I'm conducting, but obviously that means that I have to sort of catch up with wind instruments and percussion instruments. I find the percussion section endlessly fascinating. Every score I open seems to have like a new auxiliary percussion instrument that I've never heard of before and that I need to acquaint myself with. So but that's what makes it fascinating. I think if we knew everything about the orchestra from the get-go, what it's like with any score, you're never going to get the full picture upon your first reading. It always sort of evolves with time. So that's what makes it fascinating for me, is not knowing everything.
Look, when Stephanie was auditioned, she conducted many different excerpts, and one of them was the beginning of the Jardin Féerique, the very end of Mother Goose. And she started, and our orchestra played that beautifully. Yet she stopped them, and she was supposed to work and so to improve. And she right away spoke about a certain place of the bow that she wanted them to start and play. And it did improved the sound. And I was very envious because indeed I play the piano, and I can reduce orchestra's scores at the piano, and I think it's very useful. And I'm sure you're a very talented pianist too, and I'm sure we can work together even forehand reducing score, because I think it's very useful that you can do that too. but I'm not a violinist, so I will never have this kind of very natural, organic way to feel, you know, what can be done, and that's also something I'm extremely excited with you, because I can't wait to discuss together about new ideas, new solutions, especially with your knowledge on, you know, of early music and all indeed the paired instrument style that you really embrace from the UK. So we will discuss a lot, and thanks to Stephanie, I think the sound of our strings sections will even improve.
That's amazing. I mean, just both of you just sound like kids in a candy store. Maybe that's the thing that unites you. There's a lot of questions in the chat about, Stephanie, your work with the youth orchestra in St. Louis, and I wanted to just like zoom in on that portion. Is that something that was attractive to you in this position? And what is it like to work with young people as opposed to professionals?
Absolutely. It was something that immediately drew my attention, and you know, not only because of my experiences in youth orchestras and the way that it positively shaped me as not only as a musician, but as an individual, you know, being able to communicate with people from different backgrounds, to just come together and put everything that you have, any chips on your shoulders, you know, at the door, I think is an amazing skill that every child should be offered. I really do believe that. I think with the youth orchestra, it's always very interesting because I feel immense responsibility, because with a lot of the repertoire, you know, that we're doing, they'll be performing it for the first time. So you're kind of like, you know, what do I expose them to? Obviously, I want to do, you know, like the Beethoven symphonies and Brahms and Tchaikovsky, but also I'd love for them to, you know, explore contemporary music. And especially for me, the National Youth Orchestra of Great Britain was a great way that we could explore composers like, obviously, Thomas Adès, because we're big fans of his here in the UK, but Unsuk Chin, you know, George Benjamin, so many composers that, you know, you don't often associate with youth orchestras, but I think that's very wrong. And I think that you have to teach young people about music that's being written today. I think it's very important for our legacy and for the legacy of classical music in general. So I feel great responsibility, but also, I mean, I've been having a couple of Zoom sessions with the youth orchestra, just sort of meeting them and talking to them and trying to get to know them over Zoom. And I mean, they're just wonderful, and they're so sweet and so dedicated, so talented. I mean, it's kind of a perfect group of people to be working with, and they seem so eager and hungry for music. And I think that's maybe one thing that differentiates youth orchestras from professional orchestras. The professional orchestras, you know, that's their job. But with a youth orchestra, there is still that novelty attached. I think personally, as a conductor, you do have to try and inspire, you know, curiosity from even the most hardened professional players. I think as your conductor, that is the job. But conducting youth orchestras is just that tiny bit easier because they're just so excited. So I really can't wait to meet them. I'm hoping to do work with them, you know, if I make it to St. Louis in the next few months, you know, particularly work with the strings, things like Dvorak's Serenade and Tchaikovsky's Souvenir de Florence. So stay tuned. I think there'll be some really interesting things coming up.
Oh, that's so lovely. And particularly just the idea that the future of music is in good hands. I feel that every time I work with young musicians. And I believe that we have a little gift from the youth orchestra musicians. So Kristen, if you can play that video.
Hi, the youth orchestra would like to extend a warm welcome to our new conductor.
Hi, Ms. Childress. I just want to welcome you to the WILD family. We can't wait to make music with you.
We're all super excited to meet you.
We are thrilled to have you at the St. Louis Symphony, and we're looking forward to a wonderful musical journey with you.
Hello, Ms. Childress. Welcome to the YO.
We are all eager to see what exciting musical journeys await us.
That just made me beam from ear to ear.
Me too. My goodness, as I said, they're so sweet and so talented, and gosh, I can't wait to meet them now, even more.
Stéphane, can you talk a little bit about that difference in working with young musicians and professional musicians?
I will say that, strangely enough, at the start of my career, I was not conducting very young musicians' orchestra, except at the very start when I was 13. Indeed, it was the orchestra of the Conservatoire. But quite quickly, I was working with professional. It's actually later in my career that I so wanted to have this energy and to be able to give as well back a little bit what I believe I learned. So I started to work with a lot of great youth orchestra, like the New World Symphony Orchestra in Tanglewood, the Tanglewood Music Center Orchestra, the Toronto Youth Symphony, and Music Academy of the West, and other orchestra like that. And they are so good that it's not so different. And a part of me believes that we should certainly not patronize young musicians or I don't know. I feel that it's better to treat them as young, already professional or something like that. And I was very pleased to conduct the St. Louis Symphony Youth Orchestra on a few occasions, not yet in concert, unfortunately, because it was canceled due to the pandemic. But when I met them and worked with them, I must say it was for me very important that I could speak about music the same way I speak with every other orchestra. And so I tend to not really try to be different, but actually to have them just join the way of rehearsing and of playing than they will in their career.
I love that sense. I mean, as you're talking, I'm thinking about my own musical mentors, and the strongest of those were all people who treated me like a young professional in a certain way, who expected a thing like that. And that made me wonder, Stephanie, if you have particular mentors that you yourself had who maybe treated you like a young professional or didn't, but, some of the people who just really stood out for you.
Well, I've been really lucky to have a good mentor in Sir Simon Ratton. I worked with him with the SLSO recently, over an extended period of time, and I think Simon is someone who does just sort of treat everyone the same, and that is with the utmost respect and also curiosity. He's very interested to hear what one thinks about music. I think I absolutely agree with what Stéphane has said, and actually some of my most frustrating, youth orchestra experiences have been when the conductor comes in and treats you like a child, even though you're talking about not only human emotions sort of in music that's being written, but big ideas that are accessible to everyone. So that always sort of confused me a bit. But luckily, I think the people that I did work with instilled me within me a very good sense of just trying to treat everyone as professionals. I think we're all here to make music, and music is a fun thing and it's an amazing thing, but it's also something that can be deeply serious, and that actually you're trying to express things that need to be expressed, and that requires kind of focus and discipline, whether you're a young person or an older musician. So I completely agree with Stéphane. It is kind of, you do have to treat people the same way, and also that'll help them understand what it's like, being in a professional orchestra later on. You're giving them the full picture.
You make me happy because I don't know what it is to be mature. I was discussing that actually with my wife recently, saying like, I really feel actually like I'm still 12 in my brain. I know my physique is not anymore the same, for sure, but I so feel like I'm an aging child, and I don't want to change that. And in a way, as you said before, every musician, professional musician, experienced musician, at some point was a child that opened the box of their first instrument and were very moved and very excited. And this is still there. And we need to reignite this pure enthusiasm and passion, and I really don't know what means the word professional. I use it, as a common sense way to describe something. But for me, I'm an amateur, and I want to be an amateur all my life, because it means you're open to everything, you're open to learning more. And in amateur, there is amare, which means to love.
What a beautiful comment. I mean, just that sense, again, going back to that notion of a kid in a candy store. My wife likes to say that the child version of ourselves is the part that we know the best. It's the oldest part of us in some ways.
No, I absolutely agree. Don't have much to add.
Let's do a little lightning round of some questions in the chat. I use the word lightning round in a lighthearted fashion. You can take this wherever you need to. But here are some questions from the chat. I love this one because it's succinctness. Why a baton? And the rest of the question is, why not your hands? Or maybe it's like Harry Potter's wand. Does it possess magic? So, Stephanie?
I mean, I guess this is a question that a lot of conductors ask themselves. I think especially I did for a long time at the start of my career. I sort of flitted between batons and no baton. I'd be very interested to hear what Stéphane has to say about this. I think this is the one thing we haven't yet spoken about, Stéphane. But for me, there's something, I think in choral music, there's something really special about being able to use your hands. And I did a Brahms Ein Deutsches Requiem recently, where I just conducted without a baton. And I must say, it was probably one of the most special experiences I've had in my life, just kind of having that connection with a group of singers. But I guess fundamentally, you're looking to have a connection with whoever it is, with or without a baton. So, Stéphane, I'd be interested to hear what you think.
I certainly don't have an answer, because I went back and forth myself. When I was conducting as a Kapellmeister at the Deutsche Oper am Rhein, the opera of Düsseldorf and Duisburg, I think about at least 1.5 years or something, I conducted without baton, and then I started again. And now, believe it or not, after this very long and very painful forced silence last year, so from March to September, I thought that I wanted to embrace music so much that I would like to start again to do it without using any baton. And I had this fantasy that I wanted to hug the music, and you don't hug with a baton, right? You just hug with all your arm, embrasser, we say in French, like, put all your bras, your arm around. And in July in Brussels, we had a test rehearsal, a test day with Beethoven 7, just to see how it feels with the musicians far away. And usually people say that a baton is useful because it can show a movement, from further away. So it's supposedly a way to be more precise, because you can do some little movements that are very tight, and they are seen from further away thanks to the augmentation of the baton. So you would say that in this new distanciations between the musicians, where they use all the stage and sometimes more, you would use the baton. But I wanted to try without, and I did that day without the baton, and it was very strange, because I loved it for the choral quality of it. Indeed, you feel like you just sculpting the air with, everybody should sing, because that's normally what choral conducting is, without just without the baton. But I have to say, I felt that it was not always helping people that are far away. So I went back and forth, and finally I started in September to conduct again concerts, and I took the baton back. And it's more an habit than a necessity. I think really a conductor can be good or bad, with or without. So there's no real law. It depends how you feel. And I don't think that anymore, luckily, it has this kind of authority kind of instrument, like, a little bit like, like to say, like, please listen to me, on the stand, and this kind of, I'm the master. I don't think conductors today use that as a instrument of, as I said, authority. but I'm so used to that. Actually, I think I will continue to conduct with the baton, sometimes for some pieces, for some choral conducting without. There's no good answer. So Stephanie, the only thing I would say to you is please do as you feel, and at least try always sometimes with or without, because I like that. I like the fact that I could feel something differently and then choose what I wanted with an experience of both situations.
Lovely to have that sense that you're still open and curious. I don't want to say even at your age, Stéphane, because you're still a spring chicken, as we would say. But there's another question. There's a question about memorizing a score.
Oh.
How do you memorize a score? Do you have to learn every note? Can you, in quotation marks, fake it to some extent? Who wants to start with that?
Stephanie, I'll let you.
No, I think Stéphane should start. That's a tricky one, isn't it?
And like, I'll add to that. When do you decide to take the score, the physical copy of the score, away?
Well, there is a famous quote from Hans von Bülow, very famous conductor from the 19th century, who actually said, it's better for the conductor to have the score in his head than the head in his score. And definitely, we all know, everybody knows that you have to work hard to really know what is inside of the score. And yes, you can fake it in a sense that with or without score, you can pretend that you know the score and hope for the best and react to what you hear. And this is really bad conducting. This is really what I think never did, because I'm very serious. I give myself compliments here, but I'm always extremely prepared. I love to reduce every score at the piano, and it's very important to know what you're doing. Otherwise, you cannot, focus on the right thing and correct and what you hear. So basically, I wish I would know every score by heart, and I do know a fair amount that I learned in the start of my career, when I must say my brain was maybe better, let's say, or faster to learn things. And I do prefer, when I can, to conduct without a score, because it helps me to have more eye contact and a certain feeling of freedom somehow, because of course, well, it's like a hen and egg, what is first, but when you know a score by heart, obviously you know it very well. So but you cannot do that for every score, especially the new music that you have even never heard, but it's a premiere. It's very hard to know it by heart. So you can fake it in the sense that you can try to learn the beating pattern, and so then you will be kind of safe, because if you really know by heart the beating pattern, then somehow the music will still go, but actually you don't make music, you just pretend, and you don't put the right emotion inside of the music. So this is definitely not good. So I prefer to conduct with a score and be able to really be inside of the music than being distracted by the fear of not remembering and concentrating on the beating pattern too much. So voila, that's a very honest answer for me. And of course, when I conduct pieces like, I don't know, La Mer, The Fantastique, some Brahms symphonies or something, normally I don't use a score, because I learned them early enough, and I conducted them often enough to have them really in my head. What about you, Stephanie?
Well, I guess what I'm missing is experience, is just what you're talking about. I don't yet have a lot of experience conducting all of sort of the major pieces of the major repertoire. So, but I do feel that I need to know a score really well. And I remember when I was younger and when I was just starting out, I think that first I remember one experience just with friends when I was conducting. We were just playing something for fun. And that fear that comes over you when you realize, gosh, I actually don't know this as well as I should. I think that was enough to kind of scare me into I never want to experience that ever again. I think it is so important, and I mean it's our job as well, the fundamental of what we do is to pour over these things, and not only once, you know, they have to live with us for the rest of our lives, and our interpretations have to develop. And Stéphane and I were talking recently about how one's interpretation does develop over time, and how that's a good thing. And, you know, as Stéphane has been saying, you have to be curious and you have to be open to what the score is going to throw at you next, and you have to be open to that. So I hope that I will keep being open to that, and I hope I will never experience again that one experience that I had of not knowing my score well enough.
Terrifying moments, the sort of things that you have nightmares about. How do you know when you're done, Stephanie? How do you know when you have learned it sufficient that you can stand in front of people who also know it, who are about to play it? I mean, that sounds like the truly terrifying part to me. But how do you know?
I think, so this is for me. I think you firstly have to accept that you're not going to know everything. I don't think you can. Physically, mentally, there's always going to be something else. I think the point where you can be comfortable and confident going into a rehearsal is, it's like with anything, you know, any challenge that you set yourself, at some point you know that you're ready, and you know you've done the best that you possibly can within the allocated time that you've given yourself. And that's also to do with time management. I think as a conductor, you need to know when to start learning pieces for upcoming concerts and such. But it's just a feeling. And I think also you have to accept that a part of your profession and a part of your discovery is actually when you hear the music with the orchestra in front of you. Before that, the music is just in your head, or it's on the score, it's notes on a page. I think the transformation that the music has to go through when players are involved is something you have to just prepare yourself to. And that's kind of one of the fundamentals in that equation as well. So I think I wouldn't say that there is, you know for sure when you're ready, but as I said, you feel comfortable and you feel as though you have your own vision of the piece. I think that's also very important. You have your own interpretation for the here and the now. That may change in the future, that might change, you know, tomorrow after the rehearsal's over. But having that and developing that inside yourself is, I think, one of the most important things.
It strikes me that you're talking about like almost two completely different sorts of characters. One side of yourself is scrupulously prepared, and the other has to be a gifted improviser, or like totally flexible. I mean,
I wouldn't say totally flexible. I think you have to be open. You have to accept that, especially, for example, with an orchestra like the SLSO and a lot of major orchestras in the world, you're dealing with, you're working with musicians who are so talented. And I think for me as a young conductor, I don't know, Stéphane, this might be different for you, but for me as a young conductor, I also have to accept that going into a rehearsal of, say, things like Beethoven or Brahms, or even lesser well-known composers, the likelihood that they've done the piece 100 times more than I have, performed it 100 times more than I have, is very high. So once you get that out of the way, the nerves then kind of disappear. You then say, great, what am I bringing? What do I fundamentally believe about this piece? What have I been developing in myself for the past how many days or how many months about this piece? So that's what I kind of hold on to.
You're very right. I have to say, there is a moment in life where you fight for who you are, and you fight for showing what you believe in. And I have been certainly, and still can be today, of course, micromanaging or too opinionated, and really kind of asking every musician to do really my interpretation or my idea. And I have a life in music, of course, and the path for me is to try to grow self-confidence and grow my space inside, to actually welcome always more what the musicians can give. And I was pianist for Carlo Maria Giulini, a wonderful conductor who impressed me a lot. And it was fabulous to see that he was believing in that miracle. He was just saying to us with his attitude, with his language, visually, is that you will give just your best and I trust you. And what a lesson. And I'm not there. And it will take me many more years, I think, to get to that state where you just accept what's coming and you believe in miracles of the others, basically. So, you know, you go by different phases and well, you start very, very early, Stephanie, with a very philosophical ideas and extremely smart way to think about interpretation and the exchange. So I'm very, very, very excited to see how you will develop that, certainly earlier than me. You know, by the way, you hear, I'm delighted by the way she says Stéphane, because she said it with a perfect French. And I need to tell you something funny. When we auditioned her last year, a little bit before the pandemic time, actually, I thought, I knew she was coming from London, and I thought she was just speaking English with this beautiful British accent. And it's only later when we Skyped together last year that at some point I said, but you speak French too. And then she started to speak with an absolutely perfect French. I had the feeling that somebody just put, you know, on the, you know, remote control, a kind of, and that suddenly somebody was dubbing her in perfect French. But no, she does speak also perfect French. She speaks German, Italian, Russian. I had that proven to me because we exchanged a few words in Russian together. So this is extraordinary, actually. You also speak many, many languages. So I hope you will enjoy that when she will speak to our audience.
I think learning languages is my side hustle. If music was taken away, I think language is the closest thing that I'd have. So that's why I like languages so much.
Well, thank you for that. That's wonderful, wonderful. And I feel like just like we're getting a sense of how rich your insights are, and how rich your learning, but also your maturity at such a young age seems incredible. There's a question that I've seen a number of times in the chat, and I have to ask it. Favorite pieces of music to conduct? What do you, when you go to sleep at night and you dream about standing in front of your dream orchestra, your Rolls Royce of orchestras, what do you dream about conducting?
Well, I've already stood in front of it. It's called the SLSO, the Rolls Royce of orchestras. I will say that, as I said before, I have a very deep connection to opera. I think for me, the operas of Benjamin Britten are some of my favorites, and I hope to conduct all of them someday. The first opera I ever conducted was The Rape of Lucretia, and that left a huge impression on me. I definitely would put that up there as one of my favorite pieces to conduct. I will also say that every time I conduct Beethoven, that might sound very cliche, but it's, especially we've just had Beethoven 2020. My friends are tired of hearing about it, but I love Beethoven. I think his symphonies are some of the most complete and actually perfect, I would say, works of art that we have. And I just love conducting those. I think at the same time, there's something very special to me about with French music. I recently did Fauré's Masque et Bergamesque a couple of times, and I was actually even asking Stéphane for advice, I remember. And there's just something with French music. I don't know if it's a false kind of connection I've made between my own heritage and French music, but it's something that I feel a affinity towards, at least. And finally, the last thing I will say is that I am a passionate Wagnerite. That was one of the main reasons I started learning German, was because not only did I want to read, you know, Goethe and Schiller and Nietzsche and stuff, but I wanted to be able to coach singers in German and to one day, you know, do things like the Ring Cycle and Parsifal, especially my all-time favorite, and really get inside the language. So that's a short sort of trip around what's, you know, the music that I hold near and dear to me.
I love that, and an interesting and circuitous journey too. I mean, just like very varied works, but also very famous and also much less well known.
I guess I would say that there are lots of well-known composers that I listed, but I will just say very quickly that I also love Martinu, I love Schnittke, and if anyone out there doesn't know those two composers, I really implore you to go check them out, because they are, you know, one day the Schnittke and Martinu revival will be here, and I'll be at the helm, I hope.
I love it. That's great. Well, something for St. Louis audiences to look forward to lesser known composers. Stéphane, what about your dreams?
I have a problem with that music is always just kind of singing in my head. So it's difficult because it's changing a lot with the pieces that I'm conducting. It's I'm in a luxury position that I conduct a lot of music, and so I have a lot of repertoire all the time offered to me. And it's just, you know, there with me. So I cannot say that I'm dreaming to something in particular. There are some earworms, something that come back without any context. And I would say for me, this is some parts from Péléas et Mélisande of Debussy that come often to my mind, or very strange, the transition to which is, I don't know why, to the last movement of the third piano concerto of Rachmaninoff, that comes to my mind often, and I just don't know why and why that. It's not particularly, I don't know, it's not melodic, it's not, but okay. And and sometimes actually, you know, when I take a shower in the morning, I sometimes have this kind of like Indiana Jones melody, John Williams,
that's wonderful.
I don't know this yes, glorious energy feel that is in the great American music of our friend John Williams.
Lovely, lovely. I love the sense, Stéphane, whenever I talk to you, that you're kind of almost haunted by music. I don't think I've ever experienced somebody who's just like lives, it's just rolling around your body all of the time. We need to wrap up in a couple of minutes, but another thing that I've seen a few times in the chat, Stephanie, is questions about your experience in St. Louis. Obviously, you've only been there for a short time when you were there just before the pandemic struck. But do you have any things that you've experienced in St. Louis that were memorable, things that you have yet to do?
Well, yes, that's quite correct. I was there for about 13 hours. I think it was a 12-hour flight there and a 12-hour flight back. I think, you know, because of the pandemic, I had to make it quick. Well, one of the things that my dad is a huge baseball fan, as any true American, apparently. So he said, you know, he told me before I went off to the audition, he says, whatever you do, you should tell them that you know about the St. Louis Cardinals, and they'll be very impressed. And I was like, okay. So I'd love to go to a baseball game, actually. I've never been, and I hear it's a great thing. But I've said this before, and I'll say it again. I'm very excited about tasting Midwestern barbecue. I've heard many stories about how delicious barbecue is, and there's this show as well called Pit Masters or something, where you have competition between different, you know, roasters or whatever, pit masters, there we go. So I'm in it for the food as well, and also I hear there's some really great jazz places. Hopefully when I come to St. Louis, you know, they'll be open. You know, you have such great people coming from St. Louis, like Miles Davis, and so I'd really like to get involved in the jazz community as well and check it out. So those are my three things.
That's wonderful. And there's someone already recommending barbecue places. You'll find a lot of opinions about barbecue from locals.
I will bring you to my favorite canteen in St. Louis, which is the Barbecue Beasts, and we'll do a cultural exchange. You know, I love to put culture together. So I promise you that to celebrate the start of your brilliant tenure with us, we'll go to Beast and have American barbecue with French champagne.
Ah, bravo, merci.
You had that ready to go.
Of course, it is only virtual for now. But by the way, she's just he just graduated. I don't know how to say that elegantly. That it's not illegal to propose to drink champagne with this very young lady. Just right
in America, at least in America.
Well, it sounds like that is a date. Look, it has been so wonderful to spend time with you both, Stéphane and Stephanie. Really, thank you for joining us. And the SLSO would really like to thank the Stewart Family Foundation and all of those who support the SLSO. And thank you to all of you for joining in with fascinating questions. You can see what sort of conversation it sparked. Just a quick note about some other SLSO goings on this month. This Saturday at 8 p.m, St. Louis Public Radio is rebroadcasting a very special concert. The first time the In Unison Chorus and the SLSO Chorus performed together on stage, a 2009 performance of Michael Tippett's A Child of Our Time. And also on slsostories.org, there's a celebration of Kevin Macbeth's first decade as the In Unison Chorus Director. And there are some profiles of amazing young members of the In Unison Scholars Program coming up. And mark your calendars for the next Lunch and Learn on Wednesday, March 17 at 12 p.m, when we'll discuss music and health. Check your email inbox in the next week or two for an invitation with details. Now, let's all do the Zoom thing and wave goodbye. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
You.
Bye.
Stay tuned. We are very soon with you, very soon, both of us.